We now move on to our next exciting experiment here at CTO Summit, the joy of the lightning talk. So our first speaker is Christopher, who's going to be telling us everything wrong with the Internet of Things and what you can do about it. Come on up, Mr. Biggs. In 5 minutes, I pass you the microphone. Your time starts now.
So it normally takes me about 45 minutes to do this, so we'll see how we go. Firstly, what is the Internet of Things? The Internet of Things is all the computers that you don't have to type on. It's the combination of ridiculously inexpensive computing devices, communication that reaches everywhere, and cloud services that ties it together. Or to summarise, cheap, chatty and coherent. And why would you want to do that? Well, there's two reasons. One, we all suffer from information overload. Two, we don't have enough information. So one thing can, of course, solve both of those problems. But seriously, we have, to call back to John's talk this morning, we have an information budget and we are all overdrawing ourselves. So we need to be able to extend our reach, extend our vision, know about the things we need to know about without being overwhelmed. And to do this, we've created a raging dumpster fire across the entire ecosystem that we call the Internet of Things. So what's wrong with the Internet of Things? Well, it's fragmented all to heck. You've got Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, all trying to build their own walled garden that doesn't play with anyone else. You've got Mozilla who's come along and said, we're going to fix this by creating another protocol that doesn't work with anything else. So if you're buying Internet of Things devices, if you want to have a nice Christmas tree light that tells you when your build's failed, or have that supervillain display that tells you about your customer experience, what can you do about that? Well, look for things that don't lock you into one service. I bought some light bulbs, which were awesome. You just screw them in, you don't have to do anything else. You control them from your phone, that's great. They were so good. I went back the next week and I bought 4 more. Same brand, same store, different app. What the hell? So I've got 2 apps called Xiaomi light bulb on my phone. Neither of them will control the other set of bulbs. I cannot explain this. Nobody can explain this. Next problem is observability. You've got some IoT device. What does it do? Is it up to date? What have I got in my house? I just moved into a new office and it's an automated building. How do I take over an office that somebody else automated? Or a house, same problem. At the moment, we don't know. You're a developer, you want your own dashboard that tells you, is your component working? Is your error budget being met? Are your customers happy? How do you hook into an instrumented system to provide your own personal dashboard? We don't know. There's an app called Blink, by the way, blink.cc, which is probably the least bad answer to that question at the moment. Next problem is security, or as I like to phrase it, Mummy, why are you on YouTube in the nutty? Last year, Amazon marketed a camera that they intend that you put in your wardrobe and you can ask it, Alexa, does my bum look big in this? And it will tell you. That's clearly invented by some people who have never thought about the security implications of their product. And that's unfortunately a pattern that we all have to think about. So think about credentials, think about backdoors, think about, do you have security at all? I worked on a system earlier this year that was a video distribution system for hotels like this where they have TV screens in the lobby for AV systems. How well was it secured? Not at all. If I plug onto the network that it's on, I can simply consume or broadcast streams to any of those devices. So it's critical that we think about how the things that we install and buy might be abused and what are the risks of devices. And our final trash fire component is composability. It's Christmas. The IoT device that you buy and install today is going to be there for life. We've all talked about the ventilation system here. Some of us feel too hot, some of us feel too cold. What can you do about that? Nothing. Why can you not do nothing about it? There's vents all over the place here. In a sane world, they would be individually controllable. We would have buttons on our table that says, I feel too hot, I feel too cold, and collaboratively the system will optimise the temperature. This is possible, but this is not happening. So that's the kind of future that I imagine, that we have a world with simple parts, complex interactions, changing capabilities.
Under time. Smashed it. Thank you very much. Next up, Larene is going to tell us, but blind people don't drive cars. Or do they? Oh, you've seen my mum driving. All right. Thanks, Larene.
All right, hi everyone, my name's Larene. So who here has ever felt excluded in their life? All right, no, not Josh. So I grew up in a retirement village called Harvey Bay, and and I was one of the first, I guess, me looking like people at my school, not white, and so I often wasn't picked very not last for any sports teams. I was pretty tough though, so I didn't really care, but what I did find is I was often picked first for math teams, so that was great. So who am I? I started off being a mechatronics engineer, and then I've worked at ThoughtWorks, become a software engineer, and now I'm here talking about accessibility pretty much full-time. And I care about accessibility because I didn't actually know about it, but I grew up, my dad's got retinitis pigmentosa, which is, you can see, like a very, very tiny blurry hole and nothing else, and he uses the computer to do music archiving and probably blockchain, I don't know. He gets up to a lot. And so I learned about accessibility at my first client with ThoughtWorks, which was Domino's Australia. Ironically, Domino's USA just got sued by a blind person who couldn't buy pizzas in the USA. But in Australia, in Hamilton, they're actually doing a really, really good job in making sure it's accessible. So, why am I here? It seems, so this year I've been doing a little bit of a conference tour, mainly as a awareness-raising kind of stint, because sadly we as a community and profession have dropped the ball on accessibility. WebAIM, or an association called Web with Accessibility in Mind, have done a recent survey in February on percentage of the top million websites in the world that have automatically detectable accessibility issues, which usually mean that their website's really not accessible anyway. And the number of those top million websites is 97.8% have detectable WCAG2 errors, and that's the Web Content Accessibility Guideline standards. But the good thing is that they're all really, really easy errors to fix. It's low contrast text, icons for links, missing alt tags for images, and so on. And I believe that accessibility as a software engineer, as a web developer, is a non-optional skill. But it's kind of fallen away because back in the noughties and before that, the web was pretty accessible because it was just Times New Roman text on textured backgrounds. But things have changed. Things are getting more useful and more dynamic and more exciting, and actually the idea of full stack is becoming more popular and more accessible to, I guess, back-end developers. So Node.js lets JavaScript developers write web, and a recent one is Blazor lets C# developers write websites, which is cool, but it's also a little bit dangerous as well. I'm a C# developer. And so I want to talk, this is also a 1 hour talk usually, so I want to talk about kind of the money side of accessibility, because that's what seems to convince people to do it. And so the 5 things that kind of how accessibility helps your company do better: it drives innovation, it drives great brand enhancement, it lowers legal and tech risk, it enhances employee satisfaction, And it also enhances your market reach. You have more of a market to have your software available to. And so a couple of things around that, I guess, just with some stats. I really, really like stats. I do my research. I don't like to talk about these things without a bit of science backing it. So market reach, Microsoft and a research company called Forrester did a research project saying, and they found that European websites, the average European website with 1 million visits in a day, have a potential market of 2.3 million extra a year based on what they found of drop-offs of buying things based on accessibility issues. But on the, I guess, the ethics and value side of things, something that has kind of been ringing with a lot of people is being nice doesn't actually mean that you're inclusive by default. And there was a quote that really hit me in the guts when I read it, was, for better or for worse, the people who design and build the touch points of society determine who can participate and who is left out, often unwittingly. And as Jenny said before in the panel, we are responsible for the impact that we have of what we build, and we certainly do build the touch points of society. So yeah, that's my talk. Thanks.
They said it couldn't be done in 5 minutes. Look at this. This is awesome. Okay, next up we have Chris, who's going to talk about design patterns for decision making. Cheers, Chris.
Thank you. That was a crowdsourced title, and it was the most clickbaity thing we came up with. So this is timber, tannin from decking. I have washed my hands many times, I assure you, and it doesn't come off with methylated spirits or any other solvent. If you can give me some hints afterwards, I wouldn't mind. Other than sandpaper? So I am actually going to talk about mental models, and the reason being I have 5 children and I want to teach them how to problem solve, and I think mental models have been a great tool that I've used, and I want them to be able to solve problems so they can move out of home as quickly as possible. Charlie Munger is the guy generally credited with this, and so he is Warren Buffett's protege, and he has a list on the internet, and I'd recommend you have a look at it. It really is, it's a good source, and where I'm going to go with this is that having gone through his, and also having gone through Gabriel, I can't remember his surname, but he's the author of, he is the CEO of DuckDuckGo, and he also wrote a book about it. So I read his book, and he had his own list of mental models, and one of them I found in there was critical mass, and I thought that was just too trivial. And then there's also Shane Parrish, who has the Knowledge Project podcast. He's got his own list of mental models, and what I found is that you go through other people's mental models, and they just don't work. So what I'm going to recommend is that you actually start collating your own mental models, and so I've been doing this for the last 5 years, and I'm putting together that list to give to my kids. And so, for example, a mental model, or what a mental model really is, I find, is a heuristic to solving a problem. And so you take a pattern, or you identify a pattern, so which is why it's design patterns for decision making. You identify patterns, and then you've got a repeatable solution that you've known, you can see it and you know how to apply it. And so some good examples, common ones are the law of small numbers, the law of large numbers, opportunity cost. I like feature space, and that's where it's kind of one of my own mental models, but then that comes out of state space. And also there's market-based. And so how's that for time? On the market-based one, I'm going to steal 30 seconds on a segue because my dad told me this one recently. And so Reagan apparently used to tell it quite often when there was a Russian walked into a car yard, and he's just organised that he can get his car, and then he's getting it in black. The car salesman said, "Great, sign here." But then he stepped back out of the room, come back and said, "I'm sorry, sir. So I appreciate that you've just paid, but it's going to be 10 years until we can deliver that. And it'll be the 3rd of January in 10 years. And they said, "Well, morning or afternoon?" I said, and the carman said, "Sorry, sir, I think you might have missed the fact. I said that's 10 years away, morning why would morning or afternoon matter? And he goes, well, the plumber's there in the morning. So the point of then having your own list is that you curate that, and then you can come back to it regularly and keep those models in mind so that you kind of have a mental quiver. And one thing that we came up with on our table is that it might also be, and I'd really like to start testing this idea, useful to then have a set of team agreed models, for example, say 5 to 10, where it becomes your common communication, your common language. We actually use the expression domain, DSL, domain language, domain-specific language, to communicate within your team. Because as soon as you've got a language, a common language, you improve the efficiency. So that's all I had to say on them at the time.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. Smashing it. These are great. Okay, the next up we have Rob, who's going to talk about introducing 6-week iterations at Octopus, why, how, and what we learned, which I think was a pretty hot topic as well. So cheers, Rob.
Thank you. Yeah, cool. Get started. So I'm just following on from what Mike was talking about earlier today, and I wanted to expand on our 6-week iterations, and a lot of people have been interested in learning more about it. So I thought, I'll give you some more information. So just a little bit of history of Octopus. We are an engineering-driven organisation. When I first started, there were 8 engineers and roughly 12 people all up. So, almost 75% engineering. And what we did is everybody just worked on everything. We collaborated closely, and we just chose the best thing we could work on, right, as a group. And it turned out we could probably only work on 1 or 2 things at a time. And we thought, as somebody mentioned earlier, the cookie cutter approach, we would just, as we grew to 25 developers, we would just take that and cookie cutter ourselves out. Turns out that didn't work so well. A lot of what ended up happening was there was a bit of a free-for-all. We had 5 teams, they were all working on different things, and there was no real alignment. And and then what we tried to do is give each of those 5 teams an area of the product to focus on. And that worked okay, they were talking to customers, but then again we found that there was we weren't getting any real traction on delivering new features. And that we couldn't really steer the ship very well. The next thing we tried was a big Kanban board. We put everything up on the board and tracked how things moved. We had everything prioritized. The next free team would pick up the next item and put it into doing and move through. These items we were working on, they were about between 1 week to 3 months worth in size, because they were really kind of top level shippable end-to-end features. Now this was a developer's dream, because our philosophy was ship when it's ready, right? It has to be great, it's got to be quality has to be met. We wanted to delight our customers, ship it when it's ready. Developers loved that, or so they thought. Turns out, as we hired more people, it was really hard to kind of get across the agile thinking, the MVPs, and always be shipping and do experiments and learn often from shipping actual things to your customers. Unless you've really lived that kind of life for several years and internalized it, you really didn't do that as a habit. So we found teams were really taking ages to ship. It'd take 3 months or 6 months, they'd be working on the same thing, and there was no levers to force them to go ship. And people were upset. They were like, I'm so tired of this feature, when are we ever going to ship it? And our answer was, when you finish it. Right? You're in full control, this is your thing. You finish it, then you can move on. Right? So that was absolute autonomy down to the team. But then Mike read a book from Basecamp, all about 6-week iterations. We read it. I thought it was terrible, and that it really didn't apply to us. But then he said, "Look, read it again, and internalize it, think about it." And went, actually, this could work for us. I always thought 6-week iterations were probably a good starting point. What I didn't like about it was the authoritarian approach to how planning worked. Right? However, it was pointed out to me that you should never adopt the process out of the book. You should adjust it for your organisation to make sure it works and is successful for you. So we ended up doing a trial. I implemented it with one of my teams. What I was really worried about was that we would just, somebody talked about 2-week death marches. We would just have a 6-week death march. I was really worried about taking away the power of the developer to choose their own destination. And it felt very autocratic we used to do everything democratic. So we gave the team a huge feature to do. They spent the first 3 weeks kind of struggling to understand really what they were building. And turns out this is what we were always doing anyway. Just it was a bit more hidden because they had 3 months to do it. So at the end of that, they half delivered our goal, right? But we released it with an EAP. We went back and looked at it and go, this is actually great. If we spend just 6 more weeks on it, we think we can ship something. That next 6 weeks is up on Friday, and it looks like we are actually going to ship that. So it is just working for us. And after talking to the people on the team, it turns out they're actually really enjoying this. They have a deadline. They can make really good decisions about, should I keep on working on this? Should I defer this? Should I push back on some interruptions? And they can go, no, I really need to pull this thing. I really need to ship this thing and hit our goals. Or this thing actually isn't as important as we thought. Let's just cut that MVP, ship something at the end of the 6 weeks. The other great thing is it lets our CEO pull a lever every 6 weeks to move the ship to a different location. With that loose scope one, the feedback was they really did not enjoy that experience. They said, why didn't you give us something that's a bit more, more boundaries? We want you to tell us more things. That's it. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Next one, working with scientists to deliver ag tech software products in Haskell and Elm, from Roger from Cyro Data 61.
G'day. So I work within one of the engineering teams, engineering sort of section of CSIRO, along with my colleague Dave over here. And we take science through to commercialisation and cloud software products, and I'll just share a few things we've learned along the way. Now, because most of you probably don't know the difference between CSIRO and Cisco, I'll explain a little bit about it. So the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation is a quasi-government organisation, meaning it has a CEO but reports through to the Senate and government and things like that. There's a bit over 5,000 people, so sort of Atlassian-sized, and they do industrial research in lots of different domains. So there's minerals, there's mining, there's energy, there's power, there's coal, there's renewables, there's ocean. You heard a bunch of climate scientists were sacked a few years ago, etc. And agriculture and food. So that's one of the more lucrative and largest areas of the company because we get a lot of royalties from cotton. Apparently, we invented a lot of sort of different genetically modified cotton. We're 2/3 supported by government and 1/3 of the income comes from industry. It's an interesting organisation, and a lot of the decisions to build things are based on either public good or profit or somewhere in the middle. So it really is sort of truly triple bottom line. An example of that, one of the public good type things is nitrogen fertiliser pollution into the Great Barrier Reef. So the Great Barrier Reef, you put enough nitrogen into it and crown of thorns, starfish thrive, etc. So we have to work about how to give farmers enough information to be able to manage how much nitrogen they're putting in their farms at the right time so that it doesn't rain tomorrow and flood it all into the reef. So that's a public good type project. Another one is a more sort of, I guess, traditional profit-driven project where we're forecasting grain yield for and soil moisture for broadacre grain farmers. One of the really interesting things we learnt there is that our users and our customers are different people. Farmers don't have money. but the people up the value chain do have the money. And so if you can sort of get the farmers to change their behaviour or use the data that you're producing and consuming, then you can affect change up the value chain and get someone else to pay for it. Something about learning, learning to work with scientists. Scientists have very different incentives to engineers and different knowledge of the software process. So scientists are not really necessarily motivated by putting things through to commercialisation and seeing it being used. They're motivated by papers and publications, etc. So getting them to sort of join your journey to go and build something and be excited about something being out there is often a bit of a struggle. They often haven't worked, they don't know a lot of our terminology, so they don't know things like user experience design. They don't know, they've all heard of Agile, but they can write some code themselves, and they'll often write it in R or Excel or something like that, but they don't really understand the rigor of taking something through to production. So being able to, you come up with a rough ballpark estimate, yes, that'll take us 4 months or something, or six months or something, and they'll say, no, but I've got it running on my laptop. Surely it's just, you can just push go and put it in a Docker container and it'll be done, won't it? Because they have enough knowledge to talk some of those terms, but they really have never done it themselves. Haskell and Elm. So some of our projects we are doing purely functional. We love the fact that we are able to use technology, particularly say Elm in the front end, to be able to do not have any runtime errors, but again, training people up to be able to do that. We're not always, we can do that for some internal projects, but then for projects we're going to work with external partners, often we'll go for a more vanilla tech stack. That's a quick summary. Cool.
Awesome. I was hoping you'd be able to throw in that coward hurry thing, functional programming. That was a joke. God. All right. I won't give up my day job. Thank you very much. All right. Next and final lightning talk. How to stop product managers and engineers from killing each other, from Simon. It's UFC. Cheers.
UFC. I admit that's a slightly dramatic way of putting the topic, but if you've been in some of the meetings I've been in over the years, you'll know it's not just theoretical. Close to homicide on a few occasions. I spent half my career in product management. I know Reeves, we spoke about this before, also spent a long time in product management. Other people here been in product management before being in engineering? One, yep. So it's not common, to be honest, and I wish it was a lot more common. So I spent half my life in product management, probably 12 years ago, moved to engineering, running engineering teams. I wrote some words down that I remember from when I was in product management that described engineering. Slow, inefficient, too tech-focused, sandbagging, not interested in the customer, arrogant. So I remember all those things. And I remember when I joined engineering being completely convinced that I would transform them into a customer-focused, efficient, productive team. And within about a year, the words that I wrote down about product management, constantly chasing shiny things, making unrealistic demands, ignoring architecture, and arrogant. Interesting that I wrote arrogant in both cases, but anyway. So obviously product management had really gone downhill since I left them. No, admittedly, I suspect it was my perspective, and that has been my experience through career, that those two organisations have such radically different objectives and such radically different approaches to life that it is really hard getting them to work closely together. And in reality, for the organisation as a whole, the most important thing that we can do is have engineering and product management well aligned. That doesn't mean always 100% agreeing. There needs to be creative tension. They're different roles. But having them on the same page, working in the same direction is absolutely critical. So I was fascinated by the Atlassian answer to that we heard about a bit before, which is essentially take those people and put them in a leadership team together. Really, really great solution. So I was thinking to myself, so what's behind that? What, in my experience, are the sorts of things you can do to stop those teams killing each other? And I think it comes down to really, for me anyway, two things, trust and accountability. And I'll give a couple of quick anecdotes. One of them was given to me by Ken just a minute ago, actually, which I hope you don't mind me relaying Ken, but Ken is the chief architect in the company Open Gear that I'm in. And Ken told me that since I've come, we've done a whole lot of work on practices and technology choices to increase our efficiency and improve our quality. And the quote from Ken was, yeah, we're much, much faster at doing the dumb things product management tell us to do now. We can get them out the door really quickly with high quality. So trust, what does that mean? That means, we've heard it on a couple of occasions today, disagreeing and committing. Trust means trusting the other group to do their job, even when I disagree with them. So in engineering, saying, okay, product management's making that choice based on chasing a new customer, I'm going to trust them that is the right thing, and we're going to work hard to get that out, whether we think it's the right thing or not. And the same thing from product management. For product management, when we say, no, we actually can't get that feature out in 3 months, for product management to say, okay, we trust you. What are the options here? So trust, we all know, trust builds over time, and engineering's got to get good at being reliable and delivering with quality for product management to build up trust, and vice versa. The second one is transparency, and my anecdote about that was a much larger company, American company I was working for, heading engineering. We got together with product management for a product strategy workshop, 5-day thing. It was an American company, so I was in the US. And we did 3 days with product management, and after that, the two teams split up, and the COO was running the engineering team and marketing was running product management. The COO got us all in the room first morning of the 4th day and said, okay, now tell me about all the things that we've got to do that we can't tell product management about. So he basically said, I know you're going to have to do practices work and architecture work, and there's a whole lot of things, and I know we can't tell them about it, so let's list them all and make sure that we sandbag all our estimates essentially so that we can get those things done. Because we can't really trust product management to agree that it's important we evolve the architecture and improve our practices and speed up the rate at which we deliver. That's all our responsibility, so let's not tell them about it. And actually in the culture of that organisation, that was probably a rational decision, but it's critical in my mind. That was the only way those things were going to get done. Critical in my mind from an engineering perspective that we be totally transparent. We need to work on these practices. You own the budget. You know, ultimately, if product management decide we're not going to do it, we don't do it. Okay, but it's not our choice, it's their choice, but we put these things forward and we're totally transparent about it. In my experience, by building up trust, you eventually get to the point where product management says, yeah, we understand why it's important to refactor the architecture to continue to work on the technology choices over time. And by building that collaborative relationship, the organisation ultimately benefits. That was it.